Welcome to this week's episode on the Mums on Cloud9 podcast. We are delighted to have Gurpreet here, who is the head of GC Tutors and helps parents get their kids to get amazing results in exams, right? That's what we always want. I think one of the biggest pressures that we've got as parents is, if we're working full time, whether you're not or not, how do we get our kids through exams? And certainly from my experience, trying to get my kids to study and them to listen to me definitely isn't one of my strong points. So I've got very few kids that don't want to listen. I think I experienced a lot of that during COVID. They just don't want to be homeschooled or supported by me. So it can be one of those things where you really just want to tear your hair out as a parent. You're going, how do I do the best for my kid? So Gurpreet, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here today. I'd love for you to just introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit more about, at what point do you look for a tutor? When do we as parents go, actually, this would be the best idea? Do you want to kick off?
Hi, it's so lovely to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm Gurpreet, head of GC Tutors. I've been a online tutor for quite a few years now. I used to work for somebody else before. I decided to become independent last year with all my experience. I've also a trained primary school teacher, so I know the primary curriculum really, really well. In terms of when to look for a tutor, I think parents sort of come at different points to me when they want a tutor. One of the biggest moments is parents' evening. So usually when a parent has been to parents' evening, they've not realised maybe how their child has been getting on until their teacher's given them some feedback and said, they're actually struggling a little bit in spellings or writing or an area of maths that they might not have been aware of because, they could be doing all their homework correctly, or they may seem quite happy doing their homework and taking it in every week, but actually, how accurate are they with their methods and are they working at an expected level? So parents tend to come after parents' evening and say, I think they might need a little bit of help in a certain area, whether it's maths, English, writing. And especially parents who've got children with special needs. I found a lot of special needs at the moment. Parents have been sort of reaching out to say, with their needs, there's only so much at school that's being covered. Actually, I think they need that
Mm.
extra support outside of school with their particular needs to just have a bit of extra support in that area and practice a little bit more. So actually, some of the students I've had have got certain particular needs, like whether it's dyslexia or autism, and they just need that extra support outside of school. And maybe parents haven't got the time. Also, parents just the methods have changed a lot over the years when it comes to things like maths, for example. I know even when I was at school, methods were very different to what's being used now. And it's a completely different approach. So parents are really grateful, I think, to have somebody on board who can show them the methods as well. It's not always that I'm just teaching the child. If I'm setting homework as well, I will sort of say to the parent, this is how I would go about it. So there's always that advice on hand as well, which I think really helps them and makes them feel a little bit at ease, especially if their child's coming up to them saying, actually, I've got this as homework, but I can't remember how to do it. So at least the parent can say, oh, I remember your tutor saying this, and it's just really helpful for them. Another point when parents will come to me is usually after a mock exam. So if they've had some sort of mock exams or assessments in school and the score hasn't come out the way they wanted to, I think they just want to explore a little bit of, why is that? Is it down to anxiety? Is it down to, just again, something else being there, maybe some needs that aren't being met? In a classroom, there's 30 plus children. A teacher can get around as much as possible. I've been there. I know what it's like. We do our best to get around all of them. And sometimes you have a teaching assistant, sometimes you don't. It's great when you have a teaching assistant, but when you don't, you're trying to meet the needs of 30 plus children in every lesson, every day. And you need that extra time, and it's not always there. So I think that's when a tutor can really help as well. But in terms of the 11 plus, which is something I also offer, I think a lot of parents usually will either get the materials for their children and let them kind of work by themselves on the material and then realize actually they need a bit of help. They're struggling with this and I can't help them with that. And I think that's when it's best to reach out to a tutor because I can give them an approach or a method to teach them the quickest way to get the right answer, but also to understand what it is they're doing. Because the tests are very fast paced for the 11 plus. So, I mean, I think it's nice as a tutor to be able to work with, I'm working with the two extremes of special needs on one end, which is amazing and so rewarding. but also I get a chance to work with children who want that extra challenge, who are working at greater depth, and they want to push themselves, they want to get into a particular school for different opportunities, maybe because not always, but sometimes because their friends are going there, but just it might have heard things about that school, they might have visited that school. So it's great to be able to do that.
That really resonates with me because I think with Annabelle, she's got dyslexia and ADHD. And so she does have a special time at school. But also I mean, if I try to support her at home, she'll just deflect, right? And we'll get angry and won't want to do it. And it's very hard because you kind of want to, right? And then the teacher says, well, she'll get tired after school. But the thing is, if there's somebody there who's more, I suppose, authoritative or a different person, I can, absolutely the extra tutoring, she will listen to them because she won't act out in the same way that she does a parent. So it completely makes sense to me. And I think certainly when we get to that age, she will need that additional support to support her. Kelly, Lynn, have you had an experience of this?
So I suppose from my side, I mean, obviously, a long time ago, I did school runs and spelling tests and all of that, but everything has completely changed from my side. I mean, my daughter is a primary school teacher and my daughter-in-law is a teaching assistant. So I do get first-hand information on how things run. Obviously, with 3 granddaughters as well, I've still got that side of it. However, obviously, it's a long time ago and so much has changed. I mean, I suppose a question from my side would be, when children are getting low scores, I mean, how would you know when anxiety is playing a role? I think that's probably something that a lot of people would like to know. I mean, I'm sure that many parents wonder, how anxiety is playing a part and how you can tell that. I don't know if you could answer that for us, please.
Yeah, I think for me, it tends to be a conversation with the teacher is always helpful. They see your child every day, so
Yeah.
they know how they are psychologically every day. And that has, psychologically now it's great that we are focusing on the psychology as well as the academia side in
Yeah.
school. So, we are looking at, and you instantly pick up on moods and feelings, and when they're having a bad day or an off day. So I
Yeah.
think a conversation with the teacher is always a great start just to see how they are. But generally speaking, a teacher will also pick up on whether in that assessment something, the anxiety might have hit, because actually normally in their lessons when the teachers assess them, they're getting everything correct, they're doing everything right, but somehow the score does not match that. So when the score doesn't match what they're seeing day to day in lessons, then then there's possibly some anxiety. I think another indicator can be just their body language. I think you can just tell from their body language. I've watched children when they're sitting tests, and you can see when they've just hit a wall or they've just gone blank and they just can't think of the answer. Some of them are like outwardly now, you're seeing more signs of children like, showing their nerves in different ways, like tapping their feet, talking out loud when they know they're not supposed to talk out loud, but they can't help it. It's just that anxiety and they don't know what to do with it. Some of them will actually get upset as well, and it's heartbreaking to see when they're getting upset before exams because they're feeling a pressure. And I think that's where it's been great to change the mindset a little bit to say, don't think of tests as something negative, as see it as actually this is an opportunity for us to see what you need to work on. Let's see it as a positive. And that's what I tend to do with the children that I tutor with as well. I do sort of say, if I'm testing you today, and I do mock tests now and again, I will always say, this is just for me to see what we need to work on going forward. This is not for you to feel upset that you didn't get a certain score or a certain percentage at the end of it. Because I think in the past, I know especially when I was at school, if we had a certain test score, I remember having to call out my mental math score out in front of everybody. And it was an awful thing to do because I remember getting 0 on something. And
Oh,
I said
Oh.
0 in front of everyone. And they went,
Oh.
got 0. Oh my God, she
mm,
got 0 and she's the clever one. And it can instantly just make you feel awful
mm,
in that moment. And it would have been helpful in that moment if someone had said to me, it's okay that you got 0 today. Maybe you're just having an off day. Maybe you are nervous today. So, I think, yeah, I think those are the sort of signs for anxiety. But also I've had children who've sort of taken time off during assessment week as well. And you always know that maybe they're trying to avoid doing the tests. So when they do come in, kind of gently take them out separately, give them give them a bit more time. And I think it's been nice that we've been able to adapt things. And I will give a little bit more time when I'm doing a test as well to say, yes, I know it's supposed to be timed to this point, but I'll give you a little bit longer because I don't want them to feel that nervous that they just completely think, oh gosh, I've done a really bad job at this and that's it now. As I said, this is a practice for us. This isn't the actual thing, and we'll do a few practices to help with your feelings. But I think also just that general parenting, and when parents talk to them as well, and if parents can foster that growth mindset of this is a test not to just test you and make you feel bad, it's to see what we need to work on going forward.
I think that, as you say, that is so important. And I think body language is always a big deal, isn't it? Across the board. I think you can always tell somebody's mood from their body language. And I think as well, as you say, it's building up their confidence rather than knocking them back. So I think it's so important to absolutely make sure that if they're having a bad day, that you can build them up in preparation. So I think from my side, that was a great answer. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
My child's really young, so he's 2. But this is the thing with people like me. I overplan things. So I've already started, because he's non-verbal and looking like he's going to be autistic. I've already planned what I'm going to do in the future. I've already planned, like, okay, so how am I going to get into school? Is he going to fit into mainstream school? Do I need to get tutors and homeschool education? And I don't know, the thought of it really baffles me. And although I don't really mind too much about the exam process, it's just having that extra learning and that one-to-one time that I think is really valuable, especially if you're in a class of like neurotypical people. So whether he gets an A or an F on the test doesn't make a difference to me. It's just getting those extra skills, getting that extra learning. So that's what I find the pressures really. What do you find are the pressures that kind of parents and your students actually have to navigate, even things like getting into the right schools, or what are the pressures that are there the most?
I think pressures, they kind of vary for parents. So I know like some of my parents who just wanted maths and English tuition for their children, and they tend to be the ones who have, their children have got dyslexia or they have got autism. They just wanted their children to feel confident for SATs.
Yeah.
And that's what we focused on. I've just done a lot of maths practice with them, or whatever area it was that we needed to work on. It generally tended to be maths actually, which was interesting for girls, which I thought was really interesting because that really matches with the research that says actually girls are low in confidence when it comes to maths. So it was interesting that 2 of the girls that I work with, it was just getting them confident for the SATs, which have just happened actually. So SATs were mid-May. So we've had them a couple of weeks ago. So my focus was just each week practicing different exam type questions, covering the content. So for them, I think the pressure of the parents was they just wanted them to be at a point where they were confident and try the best that they could. But also some of them wanted them just to be at the expected level before they get to secondary school, because they didn't want the gaps to be too big for them. Because I think with secondary school as well, they were worried about their child being picked on or being labeled as being stupid or whatever it is. And children can sometimes unfortunately label others as not being as clever as other children, and I think they didn't want that for their child, and so it was important for them to get them to that level. Whereas I've had some other parents who I think their sort of goal was they would like their child to go to a particular school, especially for the 11 plus. I know one of my parents locally was looking at the secondary schools and wasn't too sure about some of the secondary schools. So she wanted to send a child to the grammar school because she'd heard good things about the grammar school in comparison to the state schools. But I think she wasn't very aware of some of the schools, because when I had the conversation with her to say, it's great that you want your child to go to grammar school. However, there are some really other good state secondary schools around, and maybe because she was new to the area, she didn't know that. And I said, well, from my experience and what I know of reading up on the schools, but also, personally from people who I know have children who go to that secondary school, they've said good things about that secondary school. So please don't rule out schools in thinking, oh, just grammar school, because, your child may not get a place in a grammar school.
Yeah.
That tends to be the basis of getting places is on a criteria. Your child may not meet that criteria. They may not quite get the score that they needed to get in, because it is competitive. So the needs can vary quite a lot. I think some parents just wanted, especially the parents who have had children who've got special needs, I think they just wanted their child to have, as you said, that one-to-one support, because they're not always getting that in school, and it's not school's fault. it tends to be an issue in school with staffing at the moment generally, and also nationally. SEND places in schools they're limited.
Oh, it's shocking. The waiting lists in Essex are so long. And
yeah, it's crazy. So it's, children are in mainstream, and mainstream schools are stretched in trying to meet the needs of children with complex SEND needs as well as everybody else. So there's a lot of different things for parents, and I can understand the concerns that they come out with. And I think that's where tutoring can be helpful, just to have an adult who is aware of the education system, also aware of the needs as well. That's really important, and I think that's what they want. They just want somebody who can help their child with those particular needs.
And do you actually value the kind of Ofsted ratings of schools?
Good question.
I'm just curious. I'm just curious because I always read the reports of all the schools, thinking I know I'm way in advance, but I'm always like, oh, does good mean really good, or is like outstanding really outstanding? Like, what's?
But you're moving house, Kelly, so maybe that part of that is looking at schools, right, and where you want to be close to.
That is true. I mean, I'm only moving down the road, but I mean, I could move out of town. But
Yeah,
it's
one of the
true.
reasons
It
you
is
move, isn't
one of the
it,
reasons people
different
move.
locations?
Yeah. So tell me your honest opinion. Tell me about the Ofsted reports.
The
truth.
Honestly, I will be completely honest. To an extent, Ofsted rating, yes. To an extent, I would take it into account, but not completely. Because when you're in a school day to day and you see the running day to day and the challenges that schools face, there's a lot going on. I think it just comes down to chance when Ofsted come in, that they will see all the great things that you're doing, or they might just see you on a bad day. And if that is the case, they're seeing you on a bad day or something that you haven't had the chance to develop yet, they will pick on it. If there's an aspect of the curriculum that you haven't implemented, or something you haven't put in place that doesn't marry up to them, they will pick on that and say, this needs to be developed further. And that comes into the rating a little bit. I personally don't always value the rating of Ofsted, because I have been in some schools and wondered how they have been rated a good or an outstanding, because there's always going to be something to work on. Equally, I've been in an outstanding school. I thought, this school is amazing. I can see all the great things that they're doing, but there's always something a school can work on. And sometimes the schools are working on so many different things. You just think, wow, there's so much going on here. You just need time for it to be implemented, and they're always implementing new things. And I think there's always a pressure for schools with Ofsted, which isn't fair on staff. And I know I've been in that position. I've been through a few Ofsteds myself in different schools, and it's been hard. You're sitting there early in the morning, scrutinizing your own planning even further, and you're staying there till late, and it's a very intense 2 to 3 days for staff. And it then makes you question the well-being for staff. Is there well-being for staff and teachers then, if they're having to do an intense 2 to 3 days, if we're constantly having to think about Ofsted? So it's no surprise when we get news stories about the head teacher, for example, who sadly committed suicide after the Ofsted that she'd received.
Wow.
It's awful to see that, but I can understand, because of how intense Ofsted can be. But it's a shame that it would lead somebody to do such a tragic thing based on a couple of days of Ofsted inspectors being in, because it can be a little bit subjective. A judgment can always be a little bit subjective. When someone comes in to see your lesson, they might think it's amazing. Somebody else might come in and say, actually, you're missing X, Y, and Z. So there's always a little bit of room for subjectivity in terms of Ofsted ratings, I feel. And there's a lot of question over whether it is based more on your data and whether you are getting many passes in your Key Stage 2 data for SATs. And a lot of people will say, well, if the data is really good, then the Ofsted rating is usually very good as well. But then you can have questions over, well, that data, is it accurate? Is everything happening the way it should be in terms of how exams are being implemented and invigilated? But yeah.
Kelly wants a 5-star Trustpilot review, don't you, Kelly?
I need 5-star ones. But I see the requires improvement at schools. I'm like, nope, not even looking at that. Not even looking at that. It has to be like good or above. And I think just that judgment that we all have on those words.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, requires improvement. It's interesting because I've worked in a school which said requires improvement. And when you're working in one of those schools, it's tough because you can see the pressure of like trying to get yourself back up to good, because you know that people are looking at that judgment, you know, parents are looking at that judgment thinking, oh, actually, we're not good enough. You know,
Yeah.
some parents will say, well, actually, my experience of that school has still been, it's amazing because the teachers are going above and beyond for the children. And I think that certainly counts as well, just your own personal experience
Yeah, of course.
of a
Yeah.
school and what you've seen, how your child has been, you know, how your child is being looked after in that school is very important.
Yeah, of course.
Well, there's a lot of teachers aren't happy either. We're in quite a few Facebook groups because a lot of them, well, ex-teachers transition to supermums, you know, and sort of leave the teaching profession. There's an awful lot of people that feel that pressure, and I suppose, you know, we absolutely look to teachers to support our kids in there. I guess that what are some of the strategies that we can do to support our kids, you know, when they're feeling anxious? And then Kelly, you must get this with some of our trainees, you know, this is adults or kids, right? We get a lot of super mums that go through exams with us again. They haven't done exams for a while. It's the
Yeah.
same strategy. So I think what you tell us, Gurpreet, will hopefully be useful for us as adults taking exams again, as well as the kids. You know, how do we get ourselves or our kids into a position, you know, before they're going to go in for an exam? What are the things that we can do at home to support them?
I think there's different strategies and methods you can use. It also depends on the personality of your child, because I know for some children certain methods work and for others it doesn't. So
Right.
it depends on your child really. Whereas I know like where I've got children who are very energetic, when they're suffering anxiety, the best thing for them is to go for a run or go for a
Right.
walk just to get that energy out, because they struggle with regulating their emotions. So it's just really important for them to think, actually, if I'm letting it out physically, that helps them. So that could be something. I know personally as well, for me, when I'm anxious, going for a walk is really, really helpful. So, you know, we say things like surrounding yourself in nature can work for some children as well. Going on a walk, just going somewhere green, going somewhere where they find things peaceful. You know, I tend to say to children, imagine a place where you feel calm. And that can be different for them. It could be a garden, it could be a park, it could be their bedroom, anywhere where they feel calm. So that can be a really helpful strategy. But again, just depends on the personality, whether they'd want to sit and think. Some of them, deep breathing is really helpful. Some children do find that really helpful, just a deep breath. For some of them, I think also just having a goal as well and thinking, well, you know, I'm going to try my best today. And, you know, that's one day done, counting down the days a little bit and say, well, one day done. We've just got this test tomorrow. And I tend to tell my children and say, well, we've done this test today. We're doing this test tomorrow, just to prepare them. And I think they're just aware, you know, that test is in, and we're not usually bombarding them with tests either. So if I'm giving a test, I tend to kind of give advance warning so that they know that test is coming up. Especially when I'm tutoring, I'll say, you know, we're doing a mock exam in a couple of sessions time. It will be roughly an hour long. It will seem a bit intense, but you know, it will be broken up like this. And I giving them I think the knowledge and telling them what's coming up is also very helpful, because as adults, we want to know what's coming up. So you want to feel prepared. So I think that's also a really good way of helping children with their anxiety, because anxiety can be that loss of feeling like you're not in control. So, you know, if you're going to give them the control by telling them what's coming up, this is what's happening. Maybe even them treating them, you know, if they've worked hard, treating them afterwards as to what would you like to do once you've finished your test? Let's do something positive to kind of, you know, that's done. Let's put that behind us. Let's do something nice. Let's do something fun, something you're going to enjoy. I know for some children, they love coloring. I tend to get a lot of children like mindful coloring. So that's another way as well. So it does depend on the child. Like creative children tend to use their creative output in some way, like coloring and crafting and making things. Sporty children I see tend to channel it into sports. So I think it's always dependent on personality.
Interesting. Really good tips. Yeah, I think it's really interesting to think about these different things for different personalities, if you like. And when I do creative stuff, it completely switches off the brain chatter. So I can see that from a creative side for sure. Great, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I suppose just another question from my side is, we talk about ChatGPT, and I know we talked about it earlier on before we actually started today. How does AI impact on children learning these days? It's just an interesting point that I thought I might bring up.
I'm cheating in exams, you mean?
I think it's a really good
obviously.
point, because it's so current, isn't it, now that go on to Chat GPT, type in a question, and your answer will come up.
Absolutely.
But I think for children, even, I mean, it depends on the age group we're talking about. I tend to tutor children between like the ages of 7 and 12. So if you're talking about that age group and they type in a question, sometimes, they may not type it in specifically enough for Chat GPT. If they just put the question in, Chat GPT can come up with a very complex answer sometimes, and they might look
Yeah.
at it, I don't actually understand how that's been worked out. Because I know sometimes when I've typed in a question, because I've just out of interest, I thought, let me see what it would come up with as an answer and how it would say to work it out. So I typed in a maths question one day, and it came back with a very complicated method. And I thought, I don't think a child would be able to actually understand how that's been worked out. So I would have to explain that further. So that, you'd still need an adult there. You would still need somebody to explain it to you. Unless you knew, you'd have to type in, can you explain this for a 12-year-old or an 11-year-old?
I suppose it'd be more in the realms of English than maths, I guess.
Yeah, for English, it'd be interesting for English. I suppose if it was for English, again, you need to be very specific, because if you just type in a question, it will give you a generic answer. But if you actually, sometimes you have to actually put for the Key Stage 2 curriculum for it to understand what you're talking about. Would a child think to do that? Maybe not. I wouldn't say many would, because as an adult, I've had to think, right, do I need to put in for the Key Stage 2 curriculum? And sometimes I've had to type that in. Otherwise, it will think of, anything from America or somewhere else. It doesn't know where I'm talking about. You have to be very specific in your wording for
Yeah, of course.
ChatGPT. So I think for
Interesting,
younger children,
yeah.
it wouldn't work.
No, probably for adults, maybe snacks, late nights, and ChatGPT.
But I do know some teenagers who are using AI in terms of revision, and actually that's really interesting. I can't remember the app that somebody told me about, and it comes up with flashcards, and I thought that's a great way of actually using AI to
They
revise
are really good.
struggles. Yeah, it was like coming up with missing word answers. So you would have to think of the word that would be in the sentence. It was flashcards. And I thought that's a great way of
So gonna be the
revising if you
answer.
don't like to revise. So AI can be beneficial. I suppose it depends how you use it.
So I'm interested in kind of your processes. So in terms of, let's say a parent or one of our trainees reaches out to you, what's the process? Do you assess the child? Do you do Teams calls or one-to-ones with them in person? Like, what's the whole process of actually joining with you?
So what I tend to do is either a phone call, or sometimes it's just a message from parents. It depends on what they prefer. So sometimes they'll message me. So I will either do a very quick phone call with them, or I'll just through a message, I will give them all the information they want. I've had emails before, so I email, this is the process. And what I tend to do is I've got either in person or online, depending on location. So I'm based in Shropshire. I can get to sort of Telford, Wolverhampton, those sorts of areas. So I offer in person first for anyone who's local, and say, would you prefer in person? Because again, parents know their children and they know what they prefer. And a lot of them will say, yeah, actually, I think they would prefer in person, and they would respond better to that. So I've got some that I do in person, and then others I've done online. And when I do the online sessions, I still tend to follow a similar model, where the first lesson is assessment. So I'll assess the child to see what they need to work on, and then I'll come up with a plan from there as to what we're going to focus on. So for my 11 plus students, it tends to be that I do test them on all the 4 topics of English, maths, non-verbal reasoning, and verbal reasoning. And from there, I come up with a plan of, this is what you needed to work on from the assessment that I did in the first lesson. I tend to then talk to the parents at the end to say, this is what I'm thinking going forward, and this is what I'll focus on. And I'll usually work through those areas. Then I will do a mock test, depending on, and that's usually tailored to which school or the area for the 11 plus, because for West Midlands it tends to be one test for all of West Midlands, so that makes it a little bit easier. So I've got mock tests which are very similar to the structure of the West Midlands 11 plus, so I tend to go by that, which is a good indicator for the children as well. It gets them prepared for what the test will actually be like, and it builds their confidence at the same time. So I usually administer that in person. I come back, I mark it myself and go back with feedback and say, this is what you did, really, really well. This is what you needed to work on. These are the methods, maybe this is the strategy or the method you should have probably tried for these questions. And then I come up with a plan again of what do we need to work on next until the next mock test. And we just continue like that until we get to the actual exams, which will be sort of September time. For my SATs children, it tends to be, or Key Stage 2 children, it tends to be English and maths related usually. I can offer other subjects, but most parents want English and maths. So it tends to be assessing them in English and maths. And then usually it tends to be focusing on one. So most parents, it seems to be quite maths related at the moment. So I've done a lot of maths sessions. And with the maths, I tend to work on the arithmetic side for SATs, because SATs papers there's 3 SATs papers for maths. You have the arithmetic, which is about 30 questions, and then you have 2 reasoning papers where you have to apply your knowledge of mathematics. So I tend to base my sessions on that. We do a little bit of arithmetic in the session, but I also work on topic areas for maths, and we do exam type questions just to build up the confidence and get them prepared. Again, doing some sort of test practice then after a while, just to see how would you do on this mock SATs paper. And I've found that that's always worked, because I've had children who, I can give an example of my 2 children who've done their SATs recently. You know, I think in their maths, they were getting something like 2 in their arithmetic, and now we're on 20 plus, which is a great jump in a matter of months. And that's not even in I've not been with them for a year. They started with me in September. So September until May, what is that, about 3, 4, 9 months? Yeah, 8 to 9 months.
I think we need you at Super Mums.
I think I need it. I mean, honestly, looking at my kids' homework, I can only do plus, like subtraction and the basics, without, I need a calculator. I mean, honestly, if I went back into these exams, I would get 0.
Can you imagine?
Never mind the driving test. Oh no. Yeah, it's incredibly hard. It's really useful. Thank you, Gurpreet, for going through like how you tackle it all and what you do. And obviously, you want those success outcomes. And I think you've given us some really great tips, I think, for ourselves if we're doing exams, never mind our kids. And yeah, definitely, I'm glad we don't have to go back to school and prove our worth. It'd be very tricky, but it's been really useful. So if people want to reach out to you, what's the best method? We definitely will have your contact details in the show notes, but do you just want to share your best handles to find you on?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, and probably under Gurpreet Chatter or GC Tutors will come up. I've got a Facebook page, GC Tutors as well, and I think it's GC_tutors actually, and the Instagram is exactly the same as well. So you can see my posts on there. There's client reviews on there as well. Just my services are on there, and I'm pretty sure on the Facebook page has got my phone number and my website, which is www.goctutors.com. There's a calendar in there, so if anybody wants to book a call, a video call or a phone call, that's usually another way that you can reach out as well. I'm sure my email address is also there, so if you prefer email, my email address is there as well.
Fabulous. Well, thank you for everything you do. We need you. I need you.
We definitely need you.
I need everybody I talk to on this podcast.
Yeah, you do, for sure.
For myself as well. It's been lovely to have you on the show. Thank you so much. Thank you, Lyn and Kelly, for your important questions. We shall see you very soon, Gurpreet. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Take care.